So it's such a privilege to be here with these four wonderful scientists tonight, and I know that once I introduce them and they start talking, they're going to be very humble, but actually what they're doing is not only groundbreaking in New Zealand, but it's groundbreaking around the world, and their leaders in their fields, or our junior researchers, their groups are leaders in their field worldwide, so they're going to tell us a bit about that tonight. I'll let them introduce themselves, but first of all, I'll just go through who we've got here. We've got Dr. Komo Srinivasa, and she's a neuropathologist at Auckland Hospital. We've got Amy McCoey-Chapman, and she's a Catwalk Trust Research Fellow at the University of Auckland. We've got Dr. Molly Swanson, and she's a research fellow also at the University of Auckland working in motor neuron disease. And Dr. Lola Mugisho, and she's also a research fellow at the University of Auckland, and her field is quite technical, but I think you're based in pharmacology, is that right? Ophthalmology, yes. Okay, so I'm just going to pass the mic around and let you guys talk a bit about yourselves and introduce yourselves a bit more to our audience.
Shall I try and use this mic and see how I go? Ena mana, ena reo, e rau rangatira ma, tēnā koutou, ko Komo Srinivasa ahau, no tamaki makauro. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, koutou. To the many authorities, voices and leaders, I'm Komo Srinivasa from Auckland. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel. I am a consultant pathologist from Auckland Hospital, and I specialize in neuropathology and urological pathology. I was the recipient of the Neurological Foundation grant from 2019 to 2020, and that was for my work in St. Louis, Missouri, at the University of Washington University there, where we looked at brain tumors to see the different parts of the tumor, to see how the molecular characteristics were different to the histology. Now I'm largely involved in research in prostate cancer, and I'm enrolled in a PhD at the University of Auckland in clinical education. So I'm looking at the role of online videos in postgraduate teaching, sort of at the registrar level. And I'm also a mum to 2 young kids, so I've got a young family as well. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Amy. I am a research fellow at the Centre for Brain Research. I work in a field called cell reprogramming, which basically involves converting skin cells into immature neurons, or also immature oligodendrocytes. And we use those to study and potentially treat neurological diseases. For my PhD from 2014 to the end of 2017, I was a Miller scholar, so I was supported by the Neurological Foundation, and I've since, as a research fellow, been granted a small project grant as well from the Neurological Foundation. I'm a mum to 2 cats.
Hi, my name is Molly. I am a research fellow at, split between the Centre for Brain Research at Grafton and the School of Biological Sciences down at City Campus. As Sarah said, I work in motor neuron disease, so I'm really privileged to work with the postmortem human brains that we have at the Neurological Foundation Human Brain Bank at the University of Auckland. And my work really looks at the innate immune cells of the brain, which are called microglia, and looking at how these change in disease and how they could potentially contribute to the disease and how they could be a therapeutic target to really alleviate and reduce some of the symptomology. I was really lucky to be funded by the Neurological Foundation for my PhD, which I did from 2016 to 2019. And I've also been awarded a first fellowship last year and a small project grant recently. So Neurological Foundation have obviously been a massive part of my entire research journey. Thanks.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Waitakere toku maunga, ko whao toku awa, ko Awherika toku iwi, ko Tamaki Makaurau toku tūranga wewe, ko Benjamin Mugisho toku hua rangatira, ko Anshuza Mugisho toku tamahine, ko Lola Mugisho aho. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lola Mugisho. I am a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Auckland. Like Molly, I'm also funded by the Neurological Foundation First Fellowship. I'm also the Deputy Director for the Buchanan Ocular Therapeutics Unit, which sits within the Department of Ophthalmology. My passion lies in drug development and discovery, and that's what my research is about. So I work in trying to look for new disease mechanisms that we can target to treat chronic neurological conditions. I'm also a mom. I've got a little 2-year-old who I'm hoping is sleeping at the moment. So it's been a pleasure to be here, and I'm really honored to be part of the panel and be with these lovely ladies here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for introducing yourselves to everyone. And I just want to let you all know how competitive it is for these ladies to get our fellowships and our grants, and to also for Amy and Molly to get a small project grant. They're competing against professors for those. So they've done very, very well so early in their careers. And I think I'd just like to start off by asking them to talk a bit about their career path. So how did you get into a career in science, and how have you negotiated that with, a family? A couple of you have families as well. So who would like to start telling the audience a bit about your career path?
So I didn't think I was going to become a scientist. I loved mathematics. That's all I wanted to do. And I thought I'd go to university to study mathematics. And then my dad said to me, okay, what are you going to do with that maths degree? And I said, I don't know. And he said, do you want to become a maths teacher? And no offense to any maths teachers out there, but I said no. And he said, well, then maybe you need to pair it with something. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, what can maths be useful for? So I said, oh, well, maybe I could pair it with something in the sciences then. So registrations are due for university, and I'm flicking through the science booklet, and this major comes along, pharmacology, know absolutely nothing about it, and it says, to study the effect of drugs on the body. And I thought, oh, that sounds pretty interesting, I'll take that. So I embarked on a 3-year degree, mathematics, co-majored with pharmacology, and as part of that, I had one lecture in neuroscience delivered by Sir Richard Fall, where he just walked down to the front of the lecture theatre holding this brain and just said, good morning all, this is a human brain. And I thought, wonderful, that's what I want to do. I know absolutely nothing about it, but that's what I need to do. So I completed my 3-year degree and then went on to do an honours project and just wanted to find out more about this thing, the brain, which I really hadn't studied at all for those 3 years. And decided that maybe the mathematics should become the hobby, the secret hobby, and I should follow more into neuroscience. So I did a project in Professor Bronwyn-Connor's lab, and I basically never left. I then stayed on to do a PhD, and I'm now a research fellow in her group. So I definitely did not think I was going to become a scientist. I actually didn't really enjoy the sciences really in school, if I'm honest, but here we are.
So at high school, I was a big fan of Grey's Anatomy. I had this big dream of being Meredith Grey, and so when I went to university, I actually wanted to get into med school. And I am actually really glad I didn't get in. I remember in my interview, I'm a very avid triathlete, I love my sport, and during my medical school interview, they asked me, would you give up your sport for medicine? And I said no, very quickly. And they didn't let me into med school. Probably not for that reason, but I think it was a very good reason for me. I didn't really think about it, and I didn't really think about that as a career in the sense that I don't think it would have worked with my lifestyle. And I had a very similar experience to Amy, that in first year of university, Richard Fall came down, and in my year he came down with this old brown leather suitcase full of brains. And there was a human brain, I think it's a monkey brain, and a cat brain and a rat brain, and he lines them all up and he talks you through them. And honestly, it's such an experience. It sounds really bizarre, but you sit up in the lecture theatre and you're just like, this is amazing. I want to be that guy. And
She just wanted to be him.
and then I went through second year, and I had a lecture from Professor Morris Curtis, who was amazing in the way he explained the brain, that is such a complex thing, and made it sound so simple. Just made me go, I want him to be my supervisor. And then I was lucky enough to be accepted into his lab for honours, and I stayed in his lab for PhD. And during my PhD, I did a little bit of work with Dr. Emma Scotter, who is my now boss. And I just found her the most amazing woman. I could go to her with anything. If I was feeling a bit unhappy that day, then she was there. If I had a scientific issue, she was there. And I just found her such an amazing woman in terms of her career progression. And I was lucky enough that she accepted me into her lab. And I've been in her lab for a year now, and I've never been happier. So that's how I got to where I am.
So I come from a family of engineers, so it was expected that I just go down that path. My dad didn't even think it was negotiable. He just took me to all the engineering things in high school, and that was it. But then I remember going to engineering school, and there was a biomedical engineering showcase thing happening, and I thought, biomedical. That sounds actually more fun than the engineering bit. So I went home, I downloaded the brochures and read about it, and I thought, maybe I want to do this. And then I got into first year, and everyone was so hyped about medicine. I thought, maybe I should do medicine. But then halfway down, I realized that I've got an analytical mind, and I don't think it would fit so well with med. And I'd done the same thing with these guys, and Richard Fall just blew my mind in the first semester. So I thought, maybe neuroscience. I wasn't quite sure, so I did everything. So I did neuroscience, cardiovascular biology, pharmacology. I just picked every paper I could pick in my first degree. And I found out that I narrowed it down to neuroscience and cardio as being my favorite. So then I did my master's in neuroscience, and I thought, this is exactly where I want to be. But then I met a researcher in ophthalmology somewhere, I don't know, during my master's, and I thought, oh my God, ophthalmology, the eyes sound so interesting. So then I did my PhD in the eyes, and actually, even though I've gone through different changes, I feel like I've been able to bring all of that together to figure out exactly where I want to be. And it's okay not to know which path I wanted to go straight up, because I got to test everything, which is pretty cool.
So I guess I went through a different path to these three ladies. I, in high school, was very good at science and not good at much else. And I wanted to be a chemistry teacher. But then my grandfather got sick with colorectal cancer, and I had a very, very lovely GP who sort of looked after our whole family. So I thought, this is what I want to be. I want to be a doctor, and I went to the University of Otago to be a general practitioner. So that's the pathway I followed. I decided halfway through that general practice wasn't for me, because I met some pathologists during the teaching sessions that actually were women I could identify with. They had children they could bring to work on a bad day. They had fulfilling, exciting careers. So I thought, well, this is what I would like to do. So I followed the pathway down to becoming a pathologist. And somewhere in there, neuropathology found me. And it's just a very complex and interesting subject. There's so much to learn about the subject, which is interesting. There's so much to research about it. And during our medical training, you get exposure to research as you go through. And it didn't stick for the first few times, actually. I remember talking to my husband and saying, well, I don't think I've got the right brain for research. Actually, my brain works in a different way. But I just had to find the right group of people to do research with. I think that was the thing that wasn't quite clicking for me. So I found a couple of groups that are really supportive, and we work well together. And my 2 PhD supervisors are actually really good as well. So I do this partial role of being a clinician and being involved with research as well. And I think the combination of the two is actually very fulfilling for me.
Thank you very much. I think often we come across really inspirational people and they change the path that we're on, and that's been really great that you've mentioned that in your answers. And for any of you who have heard Richard Fall speak, he is very inspirational, and I was also lucky enough to have him as a PhD supervisor, so yeah, he's just fantastic. So there's quite an interesting statistic in science that less than 30% of the researchers worldwide are women. So I'd like to just ask our panel about how you feel about that statistic. Is that what it feels like in the environment that you're in? And do you feel like you're leading the way in your field and for women, and also for those that you see coming up under you, like PhD students or summer students?
So I was actually surprised to hear that number. It seems a bit lower than I would have thought. I work in a speciality which is female predominant, so maybe I'm a bit biased because of that. But it's kind of sad to hear it's only a third of researchers are women, actually. And we should definitely, I'm glad we're having this session, and we hopefully have more of these things where we encourage girls, women, to kind of go down this pathway and show them that actually it is possible. You might not start off at a particular point, but where you end up is quite different and doesn't necessarily have to be where you thought you might go.
Yeah, I have to say, I have always felt like that we've had a number of women around us up in the Centre for Brain Research where I did my PhD. I always felt ridiculously supported by the many, many women we have up there. It does feel quite female heavy, and I do wonder whether that's just the environment that's been created. I don't necessarily feel like I'm personally paving the way, but I think that there has been a culture in at least the New Zealand research environment where women have kind of brought women up, and there have been people before us that have really paved the way. And so it's a little bit of, I feel like, a passing of the baton, that there have been women before us that have looked after us, and I kind of hope that I can pass the baton on and support women underneath me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, for example, my boss is a woman, and she's just the greatest sponsor I could have asked for. She puts my name up for everything, even if I don't think I deserve it. But even then, though, I think as a mom, it's tougher because it's really difficult to juggle everything and a baby. And I can understand why women might fall off as you progress up, because it gets tougher. So I can understand that statistic. I don't know if I live through it every day, but I think I understand where it's coming from. Yeah.
I guess similar to what Molly was saying, the group that I work in is led by Professor Brahman-Connor, who's a woman, and for the first 5 years that I was in that group, we were known as the girl group because we literally had no boys, no men in our group. And it wasn't that we weren't recruiting men, it's just the people who applied were female students. So yes, I think within my work environment, that statistic is not necessarily depicted there. But what I do know is I sometimes go into schools to talk to young students about being a scientist. And there's several times where I've walked in, and the first thing that the young girls say to me is, "We assumed you would be a man, and we assumed you'd be a lot older, and we'd assumed that you'd wear glasses." And so I said, "No, there you go. You can become a scientist. You don't have to be crazy hair and a man and wear glasses to become a scientist. Here we are in our dresses."
So when you look at the career path of the men that you work with, as a woman, do you have to work harder, do you think? Or when you look at the career path ahead of you, do you think it's going to be harder for you to get to the same level as some of the men have got to, maybe in the more senior ranks of the university or the DHB?
I think it feels like that. My mom's an academic, and something she told me when I told her about progressing and how easy it is to progress, she said, as women, we always hesitate to apply for the next stage up because we really want all our ducks lined up first, while our male counterparts might go, whatever, I'll just put it in and see how it goes. You know, so I think we have to change our mentality and actually just go for it. That would be my response to that, is that yes, it might feel like there's stuff holding us back, but we also have to try not to hold ourselves back and actually have the confidence to take that step.
Well said, Lola.
Yeah, and on Lola talking about having a baby and trying to juggle kind of a career with a baby, I'm a young female scientist and I would like to have kids. And I talk to some of my peers who are male and the same age, and those are not considerations they're having to think. It's not something they have to think about in the same way we do. I think, oh, I have to plan it around when I'm going to take maternity leave, how's that going to fit in with my career, and I think it is something that can really hold us back from maybe making that career progression and getting those promotions and getting the grants. So I think there are times that it is more difficult to make it up the ladder.
But it doesn't have to be inevitable, I think. I don't want to say that we have a difficult time and discredit all the work the men do. It's just a different way. In my 20s, was just trying to specialize and become a consultant, right? Then I had kids. I'm just looking at it in 5-year increments. I've had my kids, and, fingers crossed everything goes well with them. I can now sort of focus on myself and be a bit selfish in a way and say, well, these are the things that make me happy, and research or being a scientist is one of the things that'll make me happy, and perhaps now is the time we can sort of juggle a little bit. Difficult, but doable. So I'm not trying to do everything at the same time, and sometimes it's not an incremental step, You take a side step and you just wait. And we went away for 2 years for my husband's fellowship, and it's incredibly difficult to be sitting away from the limelight while you're waiting for someone else to do their thing. But that's not the end of everything. So you just wait your time and you come back to it when you're ready and you feel you can sort of juggle things again,
I think there's a lot of wisdom on stage here tonight. One of the statistics that we have at the foundation is that 60% of the people we fund are female. And basically what we fund at the foundation is based on quality. So we're looking for the most quality scientists. We're not setting aside a proportion, to fund women. So how does it feel to be part of that? What do you think of that statistic that actually in neuroscience, 60% of who we're funding are actually female?
I think it's great. As I said, I had a scholarship for my PhD, which was funded by the Miller family. And known as the girl group, every single girl who went through our group applied for a scholarship from the Neurological Foundation, and every single one of them got it. So we were actually known as the girl group who gets all the Neurological Foundation scholarships. That has come to a halt, so it's not that we're just being favoured. But yeah, I think it's great, and it's great to see that we're not necessarily being favoured because we're women, but that we're not being funded either. So yes, bring the grants our way.
I think it should be seen, it's amazing, but I think it should be seen as a motivation for the next, set of scientists, is that you are quality, and Neurological Foundation will recognize that and fund you for that. Yeah, it's great that it's 60% women, but it could, it's just the quality research happening in New Zealand, and you should be encouraged by the fact that it is 60% women. So I think it's encouraging to see. It's an honor to be a part of that group for me personally, because, I think these guys are so amazing. It's like, how am I sitting here with them? But I think, it's really encouraging to know that quality is being identified in the women.
I think it shows a couple of things, obviously, that we have some just amazing, intelligent women and girls coming up through science in New Zealand, but obviously, like you mentioned before, we've got some really good women mentors in science and in our district health boards as well that are just really helping you with your career path. So in terms of anyone here that's looking at starting a career path in science, what would be your advice to them?
Find a mentor. That would be my first thing. Think of where you want to be and find someone who's kind of already there. And just don't follow their path, because it's okay to deviate, but just have someone who would encourage you, because it's difficult to do it on your own. For me, it was my mom that was my mentor, because she'd gone through the whole academia and kids thing. And then once I did my PhD, then my PhD supervisor, who was an amazing woman, became my mentor. And I've just found others just along the way. But I think finding a mentor is really important.
I actually think that one of the things I've found the most useful in my career path is to actually just fight for your dreams. I think resilience is really, really important. And just if someone says no, then find someone else to ask the question. Just keep fighting and really fight for your dreams, because they're important. And if you love to do something, then just keep doing it.
And I think to echo what Lola was saying before, don't think that you shouldn't put the application in. If you don't put it in, you're definitely getting a no. So just put it in anyway. Go and talk to people who are doing something that you think are of interest. Come to events like this and ask people what it was like for them. You talk about a 5-year lifespan. I do it year by year. I've no idea. I know I'm funded, but I don't really know what I'm doing from one year to the next. I didn't think I was going to be doing neuroscience after my honours. I didn't think I was going to do a PhD. So life is full of surprises.
I find it useful if you're looking at it from a high school point of view. There'll be careers advisors you can go and talk to, or the hospital does mentorship programs or summer studentships or things where you can just come and visit the laboratory or come and visit a part of the university. So you can kind of get an idea, but it gets your step into the spot they're trying to get into. You get to meet a couple of people. They'll get to see that you're interested, that there's a brain behind whatever else is happening. You're thinking a bit further ahead, and that already puts you in the right spot. You find your social support, and then you kind of cling on to it, and then you go down a pathway that you decide is the best that works for you.
So on February 11th every year, it is International Day of Women and Girls in Science. So for people in the audience, maybe some of them are scientists, maybe some of them are parents or grandparents or friends of people that are considering a career in science. How do you think generally people can support their families and friends and those around them in this type of career?
Well, while I think it's great that there's a dedicated day for women in science, I think it's sad that it's only one day, right? We should be celebrating what we're doing every day. And I think that kind of, just little encouraging words on a day when someone's done really well in a science test or, submitted their PhD thesis or something. Or on a bad day when they're having a bad day, to be, okay, it's okay. You can just be encouraging and say, this is not the end of the world. It's just a bad day, and that's all that is. And you just move along. And I think just supporting one another is a big thing. And I find that at my workplace, we have coffee groups or mentorship groups, try and arrange little meetings, because sometimes you can get a bit bogged down with everything else that's happening in life, or looking after patients or your normal workload, it's nice to meet a group of people that think in the same way and are like-minded and just have a bit of light chat with them. So I think, try and form support groups or coffee groups or something where you're seeing people that you want to be like, or you can take a little bit away from what their life is like and learn from that.
I think it would be good to nurture their curiosity. Because I grew up with my grandparents, and I was talking to my grandpa the other day, and he said, "You were so annoying with all your questions." But they always tried to answer them or send me to someone who would answer them for me. It wasn't, now it's annoying, well, now I know it's annoying, but at the time I never knew how annoying I was, which was good because it was okay to be curious. And I think a science mind is a curious mind. You're curious about every single thing. So nurturing that is really supporting someone, I think.
Something I actually think is really important is to also encourage a supportive environment too. So it's that level of, you can be supportive of someone in science, but it's also encouraging that person to be supportive of their peers. As it's already been said, funding rounds are competitive, getting things published is really competitive, and I think a lot of the time it could create quite a kind of, I guess, nasty environment where you're kind of attacking each other, and it's really important that we continue to kind of, I guess, help each other up and realise that, okay, they got the grant and you didn't, that's really sad for you, but that's really exciting for them, and you have to kind of celebrate everything for everyone else, even if it's really sad for you.
Well said. Amy, do you have anything to add?
I think just because you talked about families, you might have a family member who's a scientist and you may not understand science or be a scientist at all. I'm from a family where my parents are definitely not scientists. My mum still doesn't quite get her head around how I turn a skin cell into a brain cell, and I can't blame her. But they always show interest. They would always ask. She'll get key words. So there's something that we do that is called, there's staining. It's just staining cells. It's called, we call it immuno. And so she doesn't really know what it is, but she knows that on Tuesday I'm going to be doing an immuno. So she will say, "How did the immuno go?" And I'll say, "It was not too bad." And so that's her supporting me in her way. So you don't have to, it's good to have a supportive environment in work, but it's also very good to have a supportive environment outside of work, even if they don't actually understand the details. Sometimes it's better if they don't.
I know it can be quite difficult to explain what you guys are doing in the lab, but I want to give you a little bit of a chance just to tell the audience what is it about your particular research that is exciting you the most at the moment.
So I'm really passionate about translational research, like I said earlier. And we've got a drug in development that is now through to phase 2 clinical trials. And that's pretty exciting for me, knowing that I contributed to pushing this through. And hopefully in the next few years, it'll be in the market. And, I walk into a pharmacy and see the name on the shelf, hopefully. So I find that quite exciting because that's literally working on cells and doing whatever in the lab, and that translates to someone feeling better, hopefully, in the future. That's just thrilling for me.
Are you able to tell us what condition the drug is treating?
So it's currently in clinical trials for a condition known as diabetic retinopathy, which is a visual impairment that results from diabetes.
So I'm at the complete other end of research. So I do essentially very much primary research where I try to find changes in the human brain. So the complete start where we're just trying to work out what we can target with drugs. And I'm just an anatomy geek. So as I said, I'm really lucky to work on the postmortem human brains that come through the Neurological Foundation Brain Bank. And honestly, I just love staring at brain sections under a microscope. I know that sounds really nerdy and like some weird, crazy thing, but we're really lucky that we can do something called immunofluorescence. And what that means is that we can target specific proteins in the brain and label it with different fluorescent colours. and it means we can get these beautiful multicoloured images that just make the brain look as beautiful as it is, in my mind anyway.
Yes, I'm a similar end of the spectrum to Molly. I also stare at things down the microscope in wonder. So I've focused a lot on converting skin cells into immature neurons, but for my current fellowship, I'm switching more towards the oligodendrocyte lineage. Short oligos, they're very cool cells. I think they're very cool cells. They're a different type of brain cell, and they look like spider webs down the microscope, so I could stare at them all day. And there's a lot of potential for them in terms of spinal cord injury, and also other demyelinating diseases such as multiple sclerosis. So yes, I'm in love with oligos at the moment.
I guess my research was similar to the other two here, in that we look at tissue sections from postmortem brains as well, but this was a group of just brain tumors. So what we did was we sampled different parts of it, because different parts of a brain tumor have different characteristics, and our point was to try and find out different therapeutic targets, basically. So what we did, we sampled different areas and looked at the DNA makeup of that, which is, the genetic analysis of it, and then we were trying to find targetable drugs for different areas. So it works in patients where the first line of therapy's failed, and then you can apply a second line of therapy because you know that there's a particular part of that brain tumor that would respond to this. And then you basically try and go down as many paths as the patient can take, or, money allows, and that gives people a longer time with the disease, and they're able to spend more time with their families. And it was actually great because we were able to be part of this amazing research where people had donated their brains to this amazing center of research, and you could be a small part of that. So.
Oh, it's great to hear you guys talk about your research and how excited you all look, and I think it's just fantastic what you're doing. I'm going to ask the panel one more quick question, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. So outside of your science and work life, to maintain a work-life balance, what kind of things do you like to do?
So I'm a bit of a freak. I have been since school. I pride myself on essentially doing everything I possibly can in life. So I'm a triathlete, so I do half Ironmans. I actually do it with my family, my husband and my parents who are here tonight. I'm also a cellist, so I'm part of Auckland Symphony Orchestra in Manukau, and St Matthew Chambers Orchestra, sorry. So I play there when I can, right next to my mum who plays cello as well. And then when I am not doing that or science, I'm also an avid sewer and knitter at home. And then I just cuddle my cat in between.
I'm a crazy Manchester United fan. So I watch a lot of football. I wake up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning to catch all the football matches. I played football too for a long time, but then slowed down once I had my little girl. I play table tennis, a bit of tennis, and yeah, listen to a lot of music. That's me, really. A bit of an indoor person.
So I'm the polar opposite. I'm an outdoor person, and I spend all my time in the garden. I run a vegetable garden, and I am slowly growing up the number of fruit trees I have around the place. And I spent the whole summer repainting part of my house, so I love renovating.
A lot of my time goes into spending time with my kids. When I'm not with them and my husband has them or a nanny has them, I go running, and I like cooking as well.
Thank you all very much for sharing from your hearts, and thank you for sticking with the science, particularly through COVID-19. And also want to say thank you to our supporters for supporting these guys through COVID-19 as well.